Honorable friends, Your Excellencies, good afternoon. I'm truly humbled by the opportunity to speak on this critical issue today, the issue that determines the future and development of our free nations. I have had a true privilege of witnessing firsthand the passion and determination in actions undertaken by the U.S. Congress, often, I have to say, under Congressman Smith's leadership, which strongly and meaningfully confronted illegal practices and human rights abuses across the globe. As a law professor at one of the most reputable universities in this nation, international arbitrator and advisor on issues on human rights, I have spent the better part of the past decade observing and legally confronting misguided and illicit practices relative to critical minerals. Critical minerals, just to define them, are defined as metallic or non-metallic elements that are essential for modern technologies, economies, or national security, and have a supply chain at risk of disruption. However, this very definition falls desperately short of appreciating a much wider, complex range of global defense challenges and ever more concerning human rights sufferings directly connected to critical minerals and their exploitation. Indeed, rarity of an element and expected profits from its exploitation regretfully incentivize unacceptable practices resulting in wide-range corruption, violations of fundamental human rights, and, as appalling as that may sound, child labor. These illegal practices are elevated to a much more sinister level if the minerals in question are so scarce and essential to the national security of other nations and economies of those nations that abusive powers, especially from Beijing, get a grip on them. It is hence not surprising that the list of most corrupt countries in this world, according to Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, almost perfectly correspond to those countries that have the highest reserves of critical minerals. Their corruption is not a matter of regional custom, as some may cynically argue, but rather an artificially and intentionally imposed system that awards few while it de facto enslaves many. And the higher the corruption in one country, the stronger the presence and control of foreign abusive powers, such as Beijing. This unprecedented kleptocratic system leads regularly to devastating human toll, to devastating human suffering. According to witness statements given at the mentioned congressional hearings in July this year that I am entirely grateful to Congressman Smith for chairing, abused African miners, and I quote, described a colonial era level of discrimination, being kicked, slapped, beaten with sticks, insulted, shouting at, or sometimes pulled around by the ear when they were not able to understand instructions in Mandarin. Witnesses continued to state that these children are required to crawl into small holes dug into the earth to recover sacks of ore. They're often exposed to radioactive materials, injuries, deadly and painful diseases. And they die at the hands of these diseases. According to U.S. Bureau of International Labor Affairs, almost 20% of all children work in this geographical area, and some of them are 5 years old. I dare, therefore, to argue that free nations should not only hold an ethical obligation, but rather a legal obligation to act and to confront this unprecedented spread of suffering. Child labor, corruption-fueled colonialism, and the return of de facto slavery are prohibited by international law and all those engaged in these practices have to face justice. I argue as well that countries are obliged to commence international criminal proceedings into companies, countries, and individuals who are engaged in these practices. Furthermore, as the message today is sent to 290 holders of legislative powers in almost 70 countries, we urge you to consider legislation aiming to prohibit the importation of minerals illicitly excavated through child labor or otherwise whose mining fuels conflict in the country of origin, as well as sanctioning all the individuals and companies who hold the power and at whose hands these atrocities are taking place. None of the proposed measures are new. None of these measures are novel. Quite the contrary. Blood minerals have been and still remained under control and exploitation of corrupt entities, triggering mass violence in the past and in some cases arguably even genocidal acts. Turning a blind eye at developments of this moment in history would be an inexcusable act. Every power should be coupled with a duty to those granting it. For the future of our children and the well-being of the children they should share this world with, I allow myself to urge you to confront the agonizing abuses and kindly bring your attention to the hearing of July this year. Civilization and humanity must mean something else. And if you are the countries that hold rare minerals, you should be aware of the pattern Beijing employs in abusing and taking over your sovereign assets. At first, they offer money. They offer loans which do not presuppose any additional guarantees. They offer investment agreements, and at the very end, they offer pure corruption, bags of money flying into your countries. Naturally, some of the politicians are too weak to say no, which leads to a vicious circle of abuse, and again, enslaving many at a price of few. At that stage, Beijing regularly takes over property which is of national security relevance, and with that property, continuously abuses, enslaves, and colonizes the country. In short term, the effects are seen at the host country, but in long term, the effects are seen throughout the world. We are heavily dependent on the mentioned minerals, and if we do not undertake any further action, hundreds of thousands of children may die. So I urge you for your attention. Thank you very much.